This lecture video covers the parts of the cell and their functions. So a lot of this will be a review from the lab on the cell, looking at parts of the cell and functions of specific organelles. So starting off talking about the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the fluid material inside the cell as well as the solid portion, which is called the cytoskeleton. So we can see that the cytoskeleton supports the organelles and has almost an appearance of scaffolding that provides structure and shape to the cell. So if a cell did not have a cytoskeleton, that would definitely affect its shape. So the fluid portion we call the cytosol, and the solid portion the cytoskeleton. And they're made up of different protein filaments. Microtubules, microfilaments, intermediate filaments, just depending on the size of those filaments. So it's not important that you know the details of that, just that you know that the cytoplasm includes the fluid portion as well as the solid framework portion. And recall we talked about cytoplasmic inclusions back in the early part of our lecture, and those are special unique substances found within a cell. For example, glycogen in muscle and liver cells, something that's unique to a cell. We might not find in all cells, but they are unique to some cells, and we'll talk more about those as we proceed through the semester. So organelles, we're going to talk about the different organelles of the cell. These are membrane-bound structures that have a specific function within the cell. So the cell is like a factory, with each organelle having a role in that cell's function. So the first organelle we're going to talk about are the centrioles. Centrioles are involved in cell division. They help to secrete the spindle that is needed to align chromosomes across a cell during cell division and moving chromosomes from one side of the cell to the other during mitosis and meiosis. So centrioles play an important role in cell division. Cilia are extensions on the surface of cells that help to move substances over the surface. So when cilia beat, for example, in the respiratory tract, they're moving mucus, which traps debris, toward the esophagus, so it can be swallowed and removed from the airways. When we cough, we are helping to move that mucus as well, but the cilia will beat in the direction away from the lungs to protect our airways from infection and trapped debris. So cilia are small, short extensions. There's numerous cilia on the surface of our cells that line our respiratory tract, the upper respiratory tract specifically, and again it helps to move mucus and protect those airways. Flagella are special structures that actually propel the cell itself, and there's only one cell in the human body that contains a flagellum, and that's the sperm. So the nucleus of the sperm is transported up the female reproductive tract with the help of this flagellum. And there's many special organelles that provide energy to the flagellum found here in the midpiece or the neck of the sperm. And those organelles are called mitochondria. We'll talk about those just in a little bit. Another cellular extension coming off the plasma membrane are microvilli. And microvilli are simply little regions of the plasma membrane that are elevated from the surface. So here we can see the plasma membrane is just pinched upward here into these small microvilli. And these don't move. They don't transport any substance over the surface. Their primary job is just to increase the surface area for substances to be absorbed across this plasma membrane into the cell. So cells with microvilli we commonly see in the digestive tract. In the small intestine we're going to find lots of microvilli to help with absorption of nutrients into the blood from the digestive tract. So microvilli do not move, they simply increase the surface area. For example, if this was a substance moving over the surface, this distance from here to here, if this were my digestive tract moving this way, this distance from here to here is not nearly as long as the distance measuring going down each one of these microvilli up and down. So again, increases that surface area for absorption. Then we move inside the cell. We see special structures called organelles, and one of the first organelles we're going to talk about are the ribosomes. Ribosomes are produced in the nucleolus. That's the job of the nucleolus. It's a small round structure within the nucleus, and the job of ribosomes, they're these small little blue structures. Their job is to make protein. We will talk about protein synthesis when we get to the next set of PowerPoint notes, and that involves DNA and RNA working to make protein. And the ribosomes is where that takes place, where protein synthesis takes place. Here we can see a messenger RNA attached to a ribosome, and that's where the process of protein synthesis occurs. So the job of ribosomes is to produce protein with the help of RNA. The endoplasmic reticulum is a network of tubules that extends across the cytoplasm. It starts at the nuclear membrane. So here's the membrane of the nucleus shown in purple here. And the nuclear membrane is continuous with the membrane of the endoplasmic reticulum. And there's two types of ERs. We'll just abbreviate endoplasmic reticulum as ER. There's two types of ERs. There's the rough ER that has ribosomes attached to its surface, and then there's the smooth ER that does not have ribosomes attached. So when we look at the rough ER, the job of the rough ER is to modify proteins that are produced on its surface. So its job is to transport and modify proteins. The job of the smooth ER is to manufacture lipids, break down antibiotics, and produce other substances that are not protein in nature. So we have the smooth ER and the rough ER. Large network of membranes extending throughout the cell. Again, the rough ER is continuous with the nuclear membrane, so you'll always find the rough ER very close and surrounding the nuclear membrane. The Golgi apparatus is similar. It's also a network of membranes, but it's much more isolated within the cell. We're not going to find it as extensive going around the nucleus. We'll find it isolated to certain regions of the cell, and it kind of looks like a flattened stack of pancakes. And it works with the rough ER to take the proteins from the rough ER, take them into the membrane by endocytosis, and modify those proteins more and package them for export. So here we can see a vesicle that was exocytosed from the rough ER, brought into the Golgi apparatus by endocytosis, and then it's modified and packaged to its final form, where it leaves the Golgi and then can be exported either outside the cell or used inside the cell. So these proteins we're talking about might be enzymes that are important for digestion, or some reaction that's part of our metabolism. So the Golgi apparatus is like the packaging department of a factory. Its job is to take the product and package it for use inside or outside the cell. We also have the Golgi apparatus for lipid molecules. It's not only specific to proteins, it can also do the same packaging with lipid molecules. So here we can see how the rough ER and the Golgi work together. So the rough ER receives the proteins that are produced by the ribosomes on its surface. It modifies them, packages them, sends them to the Golgi. The Golgi receives those proteins, modifies them to their final form, and exports them outside the cell. You can watch an animation of the same process down here if you click on this link. Copy this to your web window and you can watch that process. Lysosomes are any vesicle or any membrane-bound substance that contains digestive enzymes. So here we can see kind of a neat picture of areas where digestion is occurring within these lysosomes. So any membrane-bound packaged material that contains digestive enzymes we call lysosomes. So in looking at this picture here, if this was a digestive enzyme, we could call this vesicle here a lysosome. And you can see here it's saying vesicle becomes lysosome. So if it contains an enzyme, we call it a lysosome. Mitochondria are these kidney bean shaped structures that have an inner membrane, and this is where ATP is made in the presence of oxygen. So we'll talk a lot about mitochondria when we talk about cell metabolism, but just think of them as the ATP manufacturers. They're the fuel source for cells. They provide the fuel from glucose and convert it to ATP, which energizes cells to do their job. So again, when you think of energy, you're thinking ATP, and it's mitochondria that produce ATP. The nucleus is the central portion of the cell, so here's the entire cell. The nucleolus is that small blue structure inside the nucleus, but the purple region is the nucleus. So think of the nucleus as kind of like your garage at home. It doesn't really do anything, but what it contains is your car, and it's the car that's valuable. So when you think of the nucleus, it's a storehouse, and it contains the nucleolus as well as DNA. All of this purple kind of fuzzy material is uncoiled DNA that's in the form of chromatin, which are just long, unstructured molecules of DNA, but that DNA contains all the information we need to make proteins, and that is essentially our genetic code. So we need this information to produce new cells and to reproduce, and that is found in the nucleus. So the nucleus is a space that contains DNA, which is basically the recipe for making you, and also contains the nucleolus for making ribosomes. So this is a little video that just shows the cell in action. There's no real content related to it. It's just kind of a feel-good type of video that you can watch if you have time. Otherwise, that concludes the discussion on the cell and its function.